Hey guys, beautiful spring day out in the rice fields of Japan. Temperature's just over 20 degrees today for the first time, so very pleasant out here. So very soon they'll start filling the rice fields with water and start planting. So over the next few weeks probably they'll start doing that. So what triggered this video is recently we released a video talking about how to be Japanese. It said the title of the video was how to be Japanese, and it was talking about how Japanese people see positive human traits as being Japanese. Often they consider different positive human traits to be a Japanese trait. So if you haven't seen that video yet, check it out so I don't have to explain it again. But this is sort of an extension of that, because the discussion, that video and the discussion that video triggered, it sort of brought to mind a few things, and it would depend on your perception of what you think is a positive human trait, and it would also depend on what your attitude was towards modifying your behavior when you're in another country. So I do know a number of people, and I have known a number of people who lived in Japan long term and never really changed their approach to life from what it was when they first came here. And that was sort of intentional. That was the people I'm thinking of, that was their attitude, is that, listen, I'm not Japanese, you know, I'm not going to change just because I'm in Japan. I'm going to be just the way I was before I came here, and I'm not going to change. Which is fair enough, that's their choice, you know. Whereas I also know other people who've modified their behaviors while they've been here, so that they fit in better and are accepted more. And I would suggest, it depends on your perception, but my thinking is a lot of the things that we can be aware of here, or that we should be aware of here perhaps, are actually positive traits. So I made a note of some, just for examples. First one I said is quieter. And it depends. There's exceptions to this always, of course. So like with all these videos, they're generalizations, and there are always exceptions. But quieter, I wrote quieter because in some cultures, you know, the super Genki, the super full of energy guy, that hey guys, how you going, and what's happening, and rah rah rah, hey what's up, rah rah rah, the sort of full of energy guy, the life of the party guy, in some cultures is popular. You know, that some people like that sort of character that's all the life of the party sort of guy. Oh, he's a great guy, he's the life of the party, that guy. He lights up the room, or she lights up the room. She lights up the room when she walks in. She's so full of energy, and in some cultures that can be an attractive thing, you know, that people quite like. Whereas here, usually not so much. Usually the quieter, sort of more gentle, polite, quieter person is usually respected more and appreciated more. Usually, you know, like all these things are exceptions. So what I've found is that probably compared to what I was before I came here, I'm probably a lot quieter than I used to be. So in social environments and things like that, usually just sort of quietly part of the group, you know. The life of the party person is usually not appreciated here so much. So when you're in a group of people here, usually it's better just to defer to other people. And again, this is all just perceptions. Different people have different attitudes towards this, and some people would argue and say, I'm always the life of the party and everybody here loves me. That's quite possibly possible, but other people might say that usually here it's better to be a quieter person. And the next one I wrote was modesty and ego. You know, that's the other thing, is it's interesting, you know, you can see in the language in English, you know, we often say he's the life of the party, and we often say, oh, he's a really confident guy, he's a real go-getter, he can do it all, and he's really super confident, and those sort of things that we usually admire in some other cultures. Here, you know, any sort of ego or any sort of super confidence here is seen as being a little bit too much. Usually modesty is a big thing here. We've talked about this on previous videos. Actually, most of these topics over the years we've talked about on the How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist, because modesty is a big one here. If you get a compliment in Japan, or if you give someone a compliment in Japan, usually the response is, oh no, geez, your Japanese is really good. Oh, not really, no, I'm still learning. Geez, that's a beautiful car you've got. Oh, it's just an old car. Hey, geez, your wife's really cute. Oh, no, she's annoying. Well, we talked about that before, haven't we? So modesty is really admired here, Patience. These guys are so patient. And again, we've talked about all these things before, but when you've got to wait with Japanese people to get into a restaurant, or if you go to a fun park or something and you've got to wait an hour and a half to go on a ride or something, these guys are so patient. They're just amazing. When they're in a line waiting, they just sort of go into patience mode, and they're just so patient. It's absolutely amazing how patient these guys are. Super patient, and it's sort of considered to be the mature attitude towards things here. If you've got to wait, well, you just got to wait, and you wait quietly and you don't complain. If you're in a line here at the bank or a post office or restaurant or anywhere, I can't remember ever hearing anybody in a line here complaining about the wait, ever, because that'd be considered to be impatient and immature, so they just sort of wait patiently. So you can see what I'm sort of going with this, is that so many of these characteristics could be considered to be good human traits, being a quiet, modest, patient person, and living here tends to encourage these things. Whereas in some countries, life of the party and super confident and all that sort of stuff tends to be encouraged. Whereas here, these things, timing, here's a big one. Timing, these guys are masters of timing. In some cultures, when I see my friend and there's something I want to ask him or something I want to tell him, and he'll be talking about something else, and then I'll say, oh look, by the way, and we can change the topic like that, right? He's talking about something, and oh look, by the way, I want to ask you about this, and we can totally change the topic. I want to ask you, oh, do you mind? I just want to ask you about this. Oh look, different topic. I want to talk about this. And Japanese people tend not to do that. They tend to just, whatever the conversation is, they just go with what that is. And they tend to, and not always, but they tend to wait for the right time. And they're real masters of timing. They really are, often. And again, exceptions to this, but they'll wait. And it's been really interesting, because probably before I came here, I probably would have been one of those ones who just said, oh, listen, I want to ask you something. Before I forget, I want to ask you this thing. Whereas I've learnt since I've been here, just wait. And it's amazing if you do wait, if there is something you want to talk about, or there's something you want to ask about, or something you want to say. If you wait, often a really much better timing will present itself. And I don't know how many times I've experienced that here, where there's been something that I did want to talk about, I did want to say, did want to ask about, and I've just waited, and then it just suddenly just comes up. Either that topic will come up, or another person will say something, and just some perfect timing will come up. But these guys, it goes back to the patience thing. These guys will be super patient. Instead of that, oh listen, there's something I want to ask you. Instead of doing that, they'll just wait. And it's amazing. It's amazing. If you just wait long enough, eventually the timing will present itself. And that's all these things. I've got to tell you, from my own point of view, I've learnt these obviously, that's why these ones have come to mind first. There's probably ones that I've taken on myself, that I've learnt from myself from being here. And the timing's a big one. Timing's a really, real big one. Just wait. And then the timing presents itself, and then it's much better timing. Now's the right time to ask, and you ask the question, and it's perfect timing, Consider it to others. Yeah, it's not about me, it's about the group. I mean, there's another big one. And all these, again, we've talked about all these before, but it's not about me. So when you're in a group of people, the one that just came to mind now is I remember being in a group, and we were going to Denny's, and there was a Commodore across the street, and I really wanted to go to the Commodore, and probably in another country I probably could have said, hey listen, I'd rather go to Commodore, anyone want to come with me? and probably a couple of us would have gone to Commodore and a couple would have gone to Denny's, you know. But because it was Japan, everybody does what everybody's doing, and whether you'd prefer to go to Commodore or somewhere else is irrelevant. You think about the group, and that's in a small group, but also the bigger group too. You know, you don't think about yourself, you think about the people who live in your area, you know, and the consideration for the other people. And when you are sitting in a restaurant, you know, people are so considerate. Restaurants here are so quiet usually. Some izakaya, some traditional Japanese restaurants are pretty noisy sometimes with drunken salarymen and stuff. But usually, if you go to a family restaurant or something, usually they're pretty quiet. You know, people are considerate to the other people. So that thinking about the other people rather than just thinking about yourself. You know, whereas again, when you look at the language in English, we say, you know, look after number one. You know, you got to look after number one. Every man for himself. All those sayings that we say in English relating to, you know, looking after yourself, whereas in Japanese they don't have those. They have the opposite. The nail that gets the nail that stands up gets hit down is the Japanese one, which means if you stand out from the group, you'll get hit down. So their sayings, you know, you can see a lot about a culture by the sayings. And in English, we've got all those every man for himself, got to look after number one things that we say. But in Japanese, they don't have those ones. They have the, if you stand out from the crowd, you'll get pushed back down again sort of stuff. So it says a lot about the culture, doesn't it? Oh yeah, not complaining. That's a big one. You know, I can remember being at barbecues in Australia where people just complain. They complain about their boss and complain about their job and complain about their neighbour and complain about all sorts of stuff. Whereas in Japanese life, complaining is just seen as laying negativity on other people. So it's sort of not done. People just don't complain. Usually, I mean, again, there are exceptions to this, but usually you don't hear people complaining. You know, they're just, it's sort of seen as a bit of a, what if you did complain about something here, there's a pretty good chance someone would say shogunai, which just means it can't be helped, and that tends to be their attitude, is they see complaining as being a bit of a waste of time. Is it, if it's something that you can't do anything about, then complaining about it's a waste of time. It's a shogunai thing. And if someone says to you in Japan shogunai, that's really that's the end of the conversation, because they the meaning of that is it can't be helped. So the extended meaning of that is there's no point in complaining about it, you know. And so if someone says to you shogunai, my wife will do it now and again. I'll say, oh geez, you know this thing, and I'll say something to her and she'll go, oh, shogunai, and that's the end of the discussion. That's the end of the discussion, because in Japanese thinking there's nothing more to be said. It's shogunai. That's the end of the story. It can't be helped. That's it. End of discussion. Complaining's not cool. So you can sort of see, you know, and there are a million more examples. If you haven't seen the How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist yet, check that out, because there's just dozens of these, and it could be said. It depends on your perception. If you consider these things as being positive human traits that you aspire to demonstrate, that you aspire to make a part of your character, then these things are really encouraged in Japan, and the society tends to steer you in these directions. You know, the way it works here, the way interaction works between people here, and when you are part of a group here, and just the whole part of living in Japan tends to steer you in this direction. I mean, again, I've known a few people that have come here and lived here for a long period of time and just refused to be any different than they were the day they arrived. And no, I'm not doing any of that. I'm not Japanese. I'm going to do it my way. And I've got to tell you, I have observed that they don't seem to get very good results. Right. I got a guy here. There's a guy here that I really, really enjoy his company, and he's a great guy. But he's been like that since he got here. He's a real bull at a gate, and he just refuses to modify his behaviour. And he's just, I want to do it my way, and I don't care. I'm not Japanese. They all do it that way. I'm not going to do it because I'm not Japanese. And he just refuses to change anything. He's just done exactly what he did the day he arrived here, and he's been here for 25 years or something. It hasn't changed at all, right? Hasn't modified any of his behaviour, and he hasn't had the best results either. He hasn't had the best results because if you don't demonstrate these behaviours, quite often it's subtle too. You know, often on these how to do stuff in Japan videos, which I'll probably put this on. People will often comment in the comments, "Oh, I spent time in Japan and I never did any of those things and I didn't have any problems." And it's quite often true that you can come here and behave however you want. And because of these things, Japanese people won't tell you. There's a pretty good chance, and I know there's things that I did when I first came here that I found out later that weren't good, and nobody told me. And I look back on some things and think, "Oh, geez," and I sort of cringe because I remember what I did or what I said. And I think, oh, that wasn't cool. But nobody told me, and that's Japanese people. You know, they'll just smile at you and, oh, that's really cool. And I've had so many comments over the years on videos where, that's not true. I did whatever I wanted in Japan and everybody loved me, you know. The tattoo video is a good example of that, you know. That's not true. I showed everybody in Japan my tattoos and they all said they were really cool, which is no doubt they did. And that's Japanese people all over. You can come here and do whatever you want, behave however you want. The tattoo, don't be misled. If you haven't heard the tattoo video, go check that out. One of my favourite people in the world is all sleeved up and covered in tattoos, and I love the guy. So I've got no criticism of tattoos at all. It's just that it's an example of on that video, you know, there were people on that video saying, you know, I showed everybody in Japan my tattoos and they were all really impressed and they loved them. No doubt there was a couple of people who really did, but probably the others possibly didn't. It's just an example, you know, that you can come here and not conform to what Japanese people are doing, and they won't tell you, oh, you shouldn't really do that. They won't do that because of these reasons. Their behaviour. Doesn't matter how badly we behave here. Their thinking is that it's not right for them to tell you that you're behaving badly. So they'd see that as bad behaviour. If they tell you that you're behaving badly, they'd see that as being rude, right? So they don't do it. So people can come here and not do what they're supposed to do and behave quite badly, and usually Japanese people won't tell them. And so what happens is then those guys see one of our how-to videos and they'll leave in the comments, that's not true. In Japan, I stuck my chopsticks in the rice and nobody said anything. And I did this and I did that. Nobody said anything. It was all good. No problem at all. You don't know what you're talking about. And all that sort of thing. Which is fine if, you know, if they think they came here and did whatever they wanted to do and they had no problems. But I think what tends to happen is, and this is what I've seen with my friend, I got off track a bit, that my friend that's done whatever he's wanted since he's been here, I think he's missed a lot of opportunities. And this is what tends to happen is if you don't behave the way you're supposed to, it'll be subtle. You know, things like, for example, maybe they know somebody who's looking to employ somebody, but they think, oh, we can't really recommend him because he doesn't, you know, because he's a bit loud and a bit egotistical and he's not very patient and he's not very, you know, he's not very kind, and we better not recommend him because he might not behave well. He doesn't know how to behave properly, you know, so we won't recommend him. Or we're having this special dinner, we're inviting all these people, but we better not invite him because he's a bit loud, you know. And I think that's that sort of stuff you'd never know. You could come here and live here for a year, behave however you want, go home at the end of the year and think, everybody in Japan loved me, you know. And I've seen people make those comments before. They all thought I was great. And you could go home believing that, but there's a good chance that there's all sorts of stuff that you missed out on that you'll never know about. And I think that's the same with my friend. I look at his life and I look at what's happened to him since he's been here. And I'm sure if he was a little bit more careful about his behaviour and adapted a little bit more, I think his life here would have been much better. I'm pretty sure, because I've seen what's happened to him in the time he's been here, and you know, I think he's missed some opportunities, and I think some stuff hasn't gone very well because of his behaviour, and he's just not really aware of it. He thinks it's their problem. He usually tells me, you know, usually his observations are about the Japanese people all have these problems, rather than accepting that perhaps the problems that he's having, he's producing himself by not having these behaviors. So yeah, how Japan can improve us. I mean, it depends on what you think improving. I mean, according to him, if you ask that guy that I'm thinking about there, he doesn't see any of those things as being important or relevant, or he doesn't consider them at all, probably. But if you consider those things, you know, being a quiet, modest, non-egotistical, patient person who understands good timing, considerate to others, and considerate to when he's part of a group and doesn't complain, if you consider those characteristics and another couple of dozen more, if you look at the How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist at the different subjects that I've addressed there over the last 17 years, there's a whole heap more, whole list of different things, characteristics that are considered to be good behavior in Japan, that I would argue make you a better person, you know. So I do understand the other point of view. My friend would, if he was sitting here now, he'd be saying, why do I have to change? I'm not going to change. He sort of sees that's compromising his integrity, that if he changes his behavior to behavior that he doesn't feel is his natural behavior, that's compromising his integrity. That's like selling out. And I sort of get what he's thinking is, because I've sort of felt similarly. There's some foreigners on Japanese TV here that sort of a bit cringy, because it's sort of like they have sold out their integrity, you know what I mean? They're saying things and behaving in ways that they're really sort of selling out to be popular on Japanese TV. What they say and do, it does feel a bit like that. So I can sort of see his point of view, but that's sort of taken to an extreme. I don't think working on these characteristics in our personalities or in our characters, I don't think is a sellout. I think it's just improving ourselves. But again, it's a point of view, isn't it? Depends on your point of view. Some people will, no doubt, it doesn't matter what I make a video about, people will argue an opposite point of view. So there will be some people that go, no, if I go to Japan, or when I'm in Japan, or I'm in Japan and I do whatever I want to do and it's all good and they all love me, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. This is just an observation. My observation is that these behaviors tend to help you live more happily and comfortably in Japan, and that I'd suggest that if I take those behaviors back to my home country or any other country in the world, that they'll probably be considered to be positive characteristics, I would suggest. Quiet, modest, no ego, patient, good timing, considerate to others, and not complaining. Huh? And those other couple of dozen that are on that playlist. Anyway, can you hear the birds? I hope you can. It's just beautiful. This time of year, it's about 21 degrees, possibly 21 degrees. There's no wind. Birds are singing. There's a whole row of cherry blossom trees that I showed you there at the start, right along the bottom here. Just beautiful. So next time we shoot a video here, probably these fields, they've turned them over. You can see the farmer's been through and turned over the field. They sort of turn it over and mix it up, and then soon the next thing is they'll flood it, be like swimming pools. They'll be all like swimming pools, and then they'll come along with the planting machine and plant the rice in there. So probably next time you see that field, it'll probably be full of water, probably. Anyway, hopefully that was interesting to somebody. More videos coming soon.